Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here, and today we find ourselves in the grimy depths of Callback Prison, where goblins' bone-carved dice clatter the stone floor, ready for another game of Emerald Skulls. Well, you'll be rolling dice, pressing your luck, and gambling on your opponent's rolls, and betting fast to win big. Emerald Skulls is the sister game to Goblin Vaults, which, by the way, won my top 5 card games of the year in 2023. Emerald Skulls is for 1 to 6 players, with an expansion allowing up to 8 players. Takes 30 to 45 minutes to play, is for ages 14 and up, and published by Thunderworks Games. Now today, I'll be doing a rule school, so I'm going to teach you how to set up and play the game so that you don't have to read the rulebook yourself, so let's get started. Emerald Skulls is a press your luck betting game for up to 6 players, or up to 8 with the expansion, where you'll be rolling dice and pressing your luck, and other players will be gamblers betting on your rolls, and they're trying to be the first ones there because the earlier you're there, the more payout you'll get as points, which are gears. You'll have tough choices like how many points you actually spend to get more dice to get more points. Because the higher you put the dice, the better the reward for the person rolling the dice, depending on how their turn ends up going. If others are gambling on something hard to do, well, you may want to go for a different outcome to minimize the gears your opponents win, or stay the course for a big payout. But you also need to find the right balance and find the right time to stop and chicken out and actually get points as opposed to busting. But watch out, because others might be betting that you're going to do so. It also has many advanced betting cards once you're familiar with the game to give it different experiences, as well as a solo mode to play against the opposition. So let's see if you have what it takes to press your luck at the right time and out-thwart those gamblers. To set up, you're going to place the skull board in the middle of the table where everyone can reach it. Then you're going to find the 4 standard betting cards. In the bottom right, they will have numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. All the rest of the betting cards can be placed back in the box for your first game. You can also leave these opposition cards in the box. Those are for the solo mode, which we'll cover at the end of this video. Now the metal gears you see here do not come with the base game. They're available as an upgrade from directly Thunderworks Games, or retail partners that also get them directly from Thunderworks Games. Now you're going to total up the amount of gears and use a certain amount depending on the amount of players. It's going to be 40 gears per player. So as you see in a 2-player game, it's 80, all the way up to a 6-player game where it's 240, and there's 7 or 8 players because there is an expansion available as well. You're also going to make a pool of reroll cubes too. You'll also place the dice pool near the board. Each player is going to select a color and take the 2 betting markers of that color. You'll also give each player a double-sided player aid of that color as well. The object of the game is to have the most gears at the end. Now the game is played in clockwise order, with one player being the tumbler and everyone else being the gamblers. And it's going to continue until the gear tokens run out. Each turn goes through 3 phases: buy dice, tumble, and payout. During the buy dice phase, the tumbler can decide how many dice they want to roll. At the beginning of the game, that first player has 0 gears, so that first turn is always going to be just 3 dice. However, if you had some gears, you could pay a certain amount shown on this board to roll a certain amount of dice. For example, you could roll 5 dice if you spent 3 gears that you've previously obtained. Now you'd actually put those spent gears back into the gear supply. So after they've optionally bought dice, it then goes to the tumble phase. Now, once the tumblers decide how many dice they're going to roll, they pick up those dice, and the etiquette is they give the gamblers, which are all the other players, a reasonable amount of time to place bets. And yes, the gamblers can bet before the tumbler even rolls their first set of dice. Now, that doesn't happen often, but there may be some times where that might make some sense. So at this point, let's just pretend nobody made any bets, and so now the tumbler is going to roll the dice from their chosen dice in the dice pool. So let's say they rolled a 1, and a 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, as you see there. You see that these numbers are also on the board. We go from the teeth, up to the nose, up to the eyes, and the gem in the forehead there. Now the tumbler must place at least one of these dice. However, some levels you can place more than one. This is a 1, so they could place this one here. Now you'll notice that the 1, 2s, and 3s all have this infinity sign. That means as many number 1s, as many number 2s, as many number 3s can be there. Where here, only 1 4 can be here, 1 4 can be here, and 1 5 can be there. So they could place this one here. They could actually place both of them there. They have to place at least 1 die because this has an infinity symbol. You could place more than 1 there. Or instead, they could go like this, Well, why would they do one thing or another? Well, that's because after they roll the first one, let's say they just put this one. Now at this point, the tumbler is going to check to see if their turn is ended by one of the possible outs that can cause your turn to end. That did not happen here. We'll talk about more of those in detail in just a moment. So now the tumbler has a choice to make. Do they want to stop, which is known as chickening out, or do they want to roll the dice again and press their luck? If they decide that they want to re-roll the dice, they're going to take the dice that are left in their dice pool, they're going to put in their hand, again, give people a chance to bet. So now that you've seen how the dice roll, where they're placed, how you can place them, let's talk about betting. So while the tumbler has the dice, all the other players are the gamblers. They can bet. It's real time. It's first come, first serve. The tumbler does not bet. To bet, a player will take their betting marker and they'll place it next to a card. Now normally, you'd leave enough room between the board and the card so that players can bet on either side of the card. However, in order to try to keep everything as close and tight in frame so you can read it as possible, I've brought everything in. So normally this would say go here to where this arrow is, but I'm going to be placing them just above the side of the card because you can notice that each card has two sides. Now when you make a bet, you can only place a single bet on each side, left or right, of the standard betting cards. Also, it's real time, so another player might go and stack, and if you're going there, you'd stack on top, and this is going to affect how things pay out. Generally speaking, if you're going to get paid out by these cards, which we'll talk about later, the one on the bottom is going to get the most gears, 10, 8, and 5. So if this does pay out, this yellow player is going to get 10, the blue player is going to get 8, for example. Now as a gambler, you could place both of your markers in between the same roll. So for example, they could place here, and then also place here, for example. Now as you see, they can stack as high as however many payouts there are. In this case, there could be a third person that could bet here, but no one else could put another marker here because this is full. There's 3 and 3, where some of these only have like 2 of them, so only 2 people can bet on those. So let's say everyone's done betting, the tumbler rolls the dice and they get this. Now a skull is a wild. It can be placed alone or it can be placed with other dice. For example, this one could be placed up here as a 4, for example, or it could be placed here as a 2, but also you could place this. Remember, you're only placing on one level, so I couldn't put this at a 4 and a 2 here. You always are only selecting one level, and again, some of these you can place more than one die. So there's a lot of options here. I could place this here, 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 or here. I could place just this here, or I could place both of these here, so you have lots of options. Now let's just say for the sake of it, I place this one like this. Now the tumbler would likely decide to chicken out because if they rolled the last die and got a 1, 2, or 3, they would bust. Now at this point again, after you have placed the dice, you check to see if any outs happened. If not, then the tumbler can chicken out and basically end their turn, or they can go back to the allow bets phase and get ready to roll. Now at this point, let's just say they chickened out, which is one of the ways to sort of end the tumble phase. So if any outs happened, including them just deciding to stop, which is chickening out, you go to the payout phase. Now the first one to get paid out is the tumbler. However, if any of the outs happen besides busting, like now with a chicken out, they're going to get paid out depending on what level the dice were and what kind of dice they placed. Now normally, the skull dice get you no gears at the tumbler. The only time it does pay out to the tumbler is if they place on the 5th level the gem part of the board like this. Now we're going to talk more about that with some of the other outs, so right now this doesn't score us anything, but this gets us 1 gear, for example. Then after you pay out the tumbler, you're going to pay out the gamblers. You're going to start on card number 1, you're going to go in sequential order card numbers, and you're going to go left to right. So here left. If this one paid out, this yellow player would get 10, the second one the blue player would get 8, and this green one would get 5. If it did not pay out, they would get nothing. You'd do that for the left and right side of each of the card numbers in sequential order, and then at the end, if there's still gears left in the supply, then all players get their markers back, their betting markers. The next player clockwise is the tumbler, and you start a new round. So now that you know how the very basics of the flow of the game work and how you get points, let's talk more about how do these cards actually pay out and what are the strategies behind them. So let's say it's the next tumbler's turn, and let's say they spent a gear at the beginning during the buy dice, and they got 4 dice. They rolled, they placed just a 2, they allowed people to bet again, they rolled 3 1s. Nobody's made any bets yet, and normally they would need to place this. Well, one of the outs is a bust out. And in this case, normally they would bust out because you always have to place a die at least in the same, the highest spot or higher. And all these 3 1s are here, which would mean this would be a bust out. However, instead of placing the dice, you can take a reroll action. And there's 2 different ways of doing this. One is to spend a reroll cube. Now you'll notice some of the rewards on the board get you those green reroll cubes that you put in your supply. Now you can spend one of these to take one of the dice that was not in your dice pool add it to your dice pool, pick the dice up. Now I have one more die than I just had. And now you go back to the allow bets phase where everyone's going to possibly bet, and then you're going to roll again. But let's say it looked like this. One of the ways you can re-roll is called pick a nose. Now if the tumbler has at least one die in the nose here, you could decide to pick a nose to re-roll. Now to do that, you'd retrieve one of these three, you would add it to your dice pool, you'd go back to that allow bets phase, you'd pick up the dice, you'd let bets, and then you would roll again. However, let's say it looked like this. You could take this one, like that, and re-roll. But if it looked like this, you cannot, because you cannot take a skull using the nose pick re-roll action. Now when you pick a nose, like again, we could go like this, you place your betting marker, this is the tumbler, at the same level. This lets them know that they have done this. Now you can do this up to 2 times per turn because you have up to 2 betting markers. Now what this does is when they're rolling their dice now, not only usually you have to go at the level of your highest die or higher, but now because this marker's here, they have to go here or to the highest die. In this case, they have to place at least a 3 or higher or they would bust out. So let's say, for example, that was what they did. They re-rolled, they got 2-2-1, they have no re-rolled cubes left. So in this case, they would bust out. Why? Because they are not able to place here or higher, and they pressed their luck. So they're gonna bust out. But remember that even if one of these was a skull, it could be placed with other dice because it could be wild. Now it couldn't be placed with the 1 or 2 because this betting markers here has to be 3 or higher. But again, that does give you the opportunity to place, but if that's not possible, in this case, they would bust out. Now remember, if there is an out of any kind, you stop, you go to the payout phase with, as I showed earlier, with the tumbler getting paid out first, and again, only if they chickened out, do they get any payout. So let's go through all the cards now in detail and talk about the different things that cause these different outs to happen and making some of these cards pay out. Now this first one will make more sense now. If anyone had bet on this, again, in the way I showed you before, it pays out if there's a bust out, but only after at least one nose pick. And now you know what a nose pick is. If there's at least one there and they bust out, whoever bet on that would win. So let's look at this card. This is a gem out with only skulls. A gem out, and again, the player aid tells you what all these are. The tumbler places a die in the gem or the 5th level. Now this works only if they have skulls only on the board. In this case, they have 2 dice, they're both skulls, so this would pay out. So again, green would get 8, yellow would get 5. Now there's also a jackpot payout here. You see just below the payouts, there's a 5 gears times skulls. Now this jackpot is available to the tumbler, the one pressing their luck, the one rolling the dice. Instead of taking their standard payout, they could take a jackpot payout. Now this is why the tumbler might do specific things and make certain strategic decisions, because they're trying to hit the jackpot. And again, you're going left to right in sequential order. So here we're going to go Grin. This is running out with only teeth. Now running out is basically you've placed all their dice, but in that case, the skulls do not pay out as it shows. And you notice Grin has a jackpot for the tumbler as well, which is 3 gears times each 1 and 2 if they want instead of their standard payout. Again, this card was all about having only dice and teeth, and that's only having 1s and 2s there. And again, if there was a skull on there, it would have not paid out. Now the emerald skull is the hardest one to get because you must double out with a full skull. Now double out means the tumbler places a die on the 5th level in the gem of the head. However, even if you just do that, it's a gem out. The tumbler places a die in the 5th level. So that would be one of the outs. But in this case, you have to basically have 7 dice, have 3 in the teeth, 1 in the nose, 2 in the eye, and 1 in the gem. And that gem one needs to be the last one placed because otherwise it would just be a gem out. So that's the hardest one to do, which is why it pays out so much. And that's why the jackpot's really high here for the tumbler. They get 30 gears if they're able to get this to happen, but it's really hard to do. Now this busted fowl would pay out if there's a bust out, which we've talked about earlier, or a chicken out, meaning that tumbler decides to stop. The gem out we already talked about is if you place a die in that top gem level of the head. A run out pays out if the tumbler places all their dice, but in that case, again, the skulls do not pay out. And a double out is if the tumbler places a die on the 5th level, which is the gem, and places all their die. Now that's actually similar to the emerald skull that we looked at, but this edition has the full skull, which is having all these dice. So that's a harder version of the emptying and shiny card. Now let me remind you that the tumbler does not score if they bust out, and depending on if they chicken out or gem out, you're going to score for each dice here. If you're going to run out or double out, you're going to score each dice for here, remembering that some of these do not pay out if they're skulls. Now remember, the order is important because you're starting at card number 1 and going from the left side to the right side, but as you come down, you might end up causing the end of the game by running out of gears, because that's how the game ends. So let's say, for example, there were only 2 gears left, and this one paid out. This player is going to get the 2 gears. There's nothing left. The game would end and no one else would get any more gears. If there was only 1 gear left, this player here would get 1 gear. They wouldn't get the additional one that's no longer in the supply, and the game would end as well. You add up all your gears, whoever has the most is the winner. If it's tied, the one with the most reroll cubes wins. If it's still tied, the player who has most recently, the Tumbler, has won. And keep in mind that on your player aid, you will be able to go through all of the phases and keep track of everything. On the other side has all the outs that I've been showing. Now, if you want to learn more about sort of the finer points of the rules, you can look on page 15 where they have a frequently asked questions. On page 22, they have Goblet Etiquette talking about the timing of when people can do things. And there's also even more details about those standard bets on page 18. There are also advanced betting cards you can play with once you're an experienced player. You can see all the details of these starting on page 16 of the rulebook. To set up the solo game, you're going to set it up as if it were a 3-player game with the following changes. First of all, you're going to get together the opposition cards. You're going to get 2 of these yellow bet markers, 1 of the red bet markers. You're going to give 40 gears to the opposition, and you're going to place 80 gears in the supply. Now you're going to flip over that opposition card, and depending on the amount of dice that I have for my dice pool, like let's say on this turn, I had spent a gear, I have 4 dice. We look at 4 dice, the yellow is going to bet on Emerald Skull, right here, and the final jewel, and the red is going to bid on empty and shiny. Now you'll go through the tumble phase as normal, skipping the allow bet step. Then you're going to complete the payout as normal, and then for the gambler payouts, you award gears to the oppositions. Now you continue doing this until the supply of gears is depleted during the payout phase, or this opposition deck is exhausted at the end of the payout phase. That ends the game. Now if this deck is exhausted, you give all remaining gears on the supply to the opposition. And if you have more gears in them, then you win. You can adjust the difficulty for a more challenging game, reduce the number of cards in this opposition deck. For an easier game, reduce the number of gears given to the opposition. Well, I hope this helped you dive right into Emerald Skulls faster than you normally would if you had to read the rulebook yourself. Now, if you have further questions about the rules, there's a link in the description of this video. That's actually the best place to ask them because not only will I be notified, but so will Thunderworks Games.